here. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today, coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Beautiful, snowy, very cold. So today on the show, we have a very special guest, and I think many of you are aware of his work. His name is Kevin Matthews, and he works on the Denver Psilocybin Initiative, or Decriminalize Denver, which is a very exciting project that is looking really promising for changing the legal status of psilocybin-containing mushrooms in Denver. It's interesting that it's at the city level. We've seen other folks try this at the state level and federal level, but city governments are a little more manageable, which is really cool. So maybe a ballot measure that you all want to bring to your own town hall. So in this interview, we get into a lot of different stuff, from drug policy to the reason why Kevin is working so hard on this project, and some interesting stuff around the Federal Right to Try Act, and a psychiatrist who actually prescribed psilocybin-containing mushrooms to his patient legally, and a bunch more. So I think you're really going to dig it. Again, Kevin Matthews with Decriminalize Denver, or the Denver Psilocybin Initiative. If you want to support the show, I'm going to make this one short. Please leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. It takes only a minute on iTunes, and it takes about 20 seconds on Facebook. So to do that on iTunes, you just take a moment, search for Psychedelics Today, and in the iTunes store, and there should be a review button right there, or some stars. We would love it either way. So thanks again for listening to this show, and we'll see you in a week. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore here, recording in person with Kevin Matthews. Kevin's doing some really important work in Denver right now. I mean, many of you have probably heard about the mushroom work going on there. So, Kevin, what's the name of your group?
Hey, Joe. Yes, it's the name of our group is Decriminalize Denver, and we recently submitted our ballot initiative called the Denver Psilocybin Mushroom Decriminalization Initiative, and now we're collecting signatures to make the ballot for May 2019.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And what did you tell me earlier? You're at like 2,000 signatures?
We're getting pretty close to 2,000 signatures.
That's so awesome. In 3 weeks. So
yep.
What's the window you have to get?
We have, we have 8 weeks.
8 weeks. 8 weeks left?
8 weeks left.
Yeah, you're going to get there.
January 7th, 2019 is the cutoff, the deadline.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you're getting support from a lot of different avenues, which is awesome. Like, it sounds like the cannabis industry is being really supportive. Obviously there's not, well, to me, this isn't like a Budweiser or a joint thing. This is like less regularly. So there's like kind of less money in it, quote unquote, recreationally. But I think there is big money downstream all over this thing. So maybe they're watching it from that aspect, or maybe the cannabis people just like mushrooms a lot and they don't want their friends to go to jail. So what made you interested in this project?
I spent the better part of the last decade on this, whether you call it classic or cliche, the search for self and meaning. Mm-hmm. I was a cadet at the U.S. Military Academy for 3 years and left there due to major depression, and got an honorable discharge, and I'm in fact retired from the U.S. Army. And that was my life for most of my life. It's all I knew. It's all I wanted to do, was to be a career military officer. Mm-hmm. When that fell apart, I was like, who am I? What am I doing? And mushrooms have been an integral part of my experience for the last decade. And it's just something that I can say that they've really in many ways saved my life. Mm. In many ways, they've had an impact, introduced me to a new way of thinking, a new way of observing the world, a new perspective on how we can be better both as human beings and create more vibrant communities. And so for me, it's very personal because they've had such a positive impact. With my depression, I don't experience the symptoms anymore. And it's something that I can rely on personally to just to help me create new frameworks for my experience here as a human being, without that kind of overlay that depression creates in someone's life, where the world might look gloomy and gray on the outside. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm involved with this. And then I think it was late 2017, I heard of the initiative in California and was very curious about that. And then a couple weeks later, I heard that we'd started potentially having a conversation about creating an initiative in Denver. And I just met the right people at the right time, and here we are today. Yeah.
That's outstanding. It's I don't know the right way to phrase this. So self-healing through psychedelics seems to be something that everybody wants to be super careful talking about, because I don't know what's going on there. Is it like disempowering therapists? Is it like maybe trampling on the medical model that we're kind of married to? Or like, I hear these self-healing stories regularly.
Same here.
But like how do you think about that relative to like the medical stuff that's going on, and
Sure.
like the lack of willingness to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, people are nervous to talk about it, for one, of course, because they're Schedule I substances, and still people are scared about it. Right. Just because they're illegal. However, just like you, I've heard a number of anecdotal stories, tons of anecdotal stories where individuals are willing to take that risk to try something that might have a better impact or be more effective in their own personal therapy. A great story around that. I've a friend of ours who is one of a handful of people in Colorado who's currently actually prescribed psilocybin under the Federal Right to Try Act. And so with that act, anybody who has a life-threatening illness can use any substance that's passed a phase 1 clinical trial to see if it'll have an impact on their symptoms.
Psilocybin has made it past phase 1?
It has made it past phase 1. They just started their phase 2 trials through Compass Pathways, looking at treatment-resistant depression. So this individual, he started his protocol back in March, and he has tumors all up and down his spine and in his brain, and multi-symptom PTSD. And since March, his doctors are blown away. They are starting to document his entire process now, even to the point where his psychiatrist said that it's nothing short of miraculous. His change in behavior, his change in being able to actually participate almost like a normal human being in the world. And so the question there is, like, he has to source it himself, and which is still kind of that gray territory, right? And he but it's had such an incredible impact for him that he's willing to take the risk. And I think these stories of people microdosing for their depression, individuals using mushrooms to treat their cluster headaches, I've heard stories where it actually helps with pain management, and it seems like we need an alternative paradigm to mental health in this country. And that's a big reason why we're doing this work, is to make, in many ways, create, in a sense, a sanctuary city for the residents of Denver, to be able to utilize these substances to treat themselves. And the cool thing about my friend who has the PTSD and the tumors is that he manages his own protocol. It puts him in touch with his own body. He knows when he needs it. He knows when he has to take another dose. He takes like 1.5 to 2 grams of dried mushrooms every 7 to 10 days. And then occasionally, depending on how he's feeling, he might have a little booster dosed in between then. But it gives him control. It gives him responsibility and management over his own protocol, which I think in many ways is a net positive, because it allows people to just take care of themselves, without necessarily going through, the insurance paradigm or the pharmaceutical paradigm. So, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff, of course. Like, people, we need that as a society, but it's also, it's a new step. It's a step in the right direction, I think. Yeah.
Those are really conservative numbers too, like the 1.5 to 2 gram number.
Yep.
Every 7 to 10 days. That's pretty awesome. And compared to other drugs he could be on, that's way less impactful and way less like brutal on him. Think about like heavy duty Zoloft prescription or something, and how minimally effective it is for the load it's going to put on your body. Like that's awesome, and it's great to hear that. So listeners, definitely Google Federal Right to Try Act. That's what it's called. Yep.
Trump just signed that into law over the summer, and we've actually had a Colorado Right to Try Act since 2014, and they're a little bit different, but essentially they're almost the same thing. It's mostly allowing people with terminal illnesses or life-threatening disease to utilize other substances.
Do you have to get permission?
You need psychiatric approval. Yeah, so you actually get you get a prescription from your psychiatrist.
Whoa. Okay, so I could see scenarios where complex or treatment-resistant PTSD could be considered life-threatening, especially if you had reckless behavior in your past. So, think about that, people. If you know friends with it and are under the care of a psychiatrist, maybe have them check it out. Now that, for better or worse, Compass has gotten breakthrough status through the FDA for psilocybin, I think there is even more credibility to this idea. Like 2 years ago, I had somebody roll their eyes at me talking about psychedelics who's a doctor. And now just a few weeks ago, they said, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. I'm like, fuck you. But
people are becoming more aware. It's shifting.
Right.
Yeah.
The media landscape has changed a ton in the last couple of years too. It's obnoxious to me to keep giving him so much credit, but Pollan's really helped quite a bit. He's this kind of New Yorker who's just, everybody loves him. So people listen, and it's helped a lot. We just need Bill O'Reilly and a few others to get on board talking about it. And then we're in the money.
Absolutely. I mean, any kind of press is good press, right? Like, it's something that we need more people to be aware of the benefits, and to start really just being curious about the research and exploring it on their own. Whether they're exploring it personally and actually using some of the medicine, or if they're just doing the research and becoming aware of how powerful these substances are. It's pretty incredible.
Where are you seeing a lot of your support come from for this movement?
Cannabis industry is definitely one of them. And that seems like a given. But really it's individuals who want to see a shift in the conversation around drug policy. In particular, a lot of veterans as well. We're working with a veterans group here in Colorado called Veterans for Natural Rights. And
what's the leader's name of that group?
It's Matt Kale.
Matt Kale.
Yep. So Matt Kale and a number of his whole group of veterans marched on Washington, D.C., I think back in 2014, and went to the Veterans Affairs Office building and the federal building, and made their statement by smoking up some joints there right in front of the building. So, veterans groups, drug policy advocates, cannabis industry folks, and then we hear a lot of support as well from, doctors and clinicians, and in many ways it might seem surprising, but I get messages a lot of the time from individuals who are parents of individuals who are suffering from depression, people who might traditionally be more conservative or might not have any specific views on drug policy, but their current treatment options aren't working for their kids. So it's coming from a lot of different places, and in Denver so far, since we're collecting signatures from our polling data, we have 45% support in the city, and it's been nothing short of incredible to see the overwhelming yes, and sometimes a hell yes that we're getting from people. Like, let's do this. Let's start the conversation.
Right. It's interesting that it's Colorado, and I'm thankful it's Colorado, because there's kind of been a long running psychedelic subculture here for a very long time, and it's also kind of a fact that the state treats going to the desert like Moab or something, which is illegal. Don't do it, maybe. and eating mushrooms in the desert at Arches National Park or something. Like that's a really common thing for people of Colorado to do. And it's more meaningful to those individuals than almost anything they do, I think. You know, they might still have their day-to-day grind or get drunk every weekend or whatever, but you know, once or twice a year, they get to go do that, and it is the number one thing that connects them with their friends and, you know, improves their relationship with the world. And it's like a nice touch point for them. Like, okay, I'm feeling really fucked up. Maybe I'm just going to go do that right now. So they're kind of already self-medicating. I don't know if this perception holds outside of the mountains. I think it does with the Denver folks I know, but and Boulder folks. But, you know, in Boulder, I guess you just don't need to leave Boulder.
Not so much.
So, yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on that kind of attitude? I know it's Denver people, but leaving Denver, and it's definitely still illegal to do it in all of these places, but it seems common, right?
It seems very common. They're just like you said. There's this. I mean, for years, there's a very strong undercurrent of use in our culture, right? And I mean, ever since the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, a lot of people went underground with this and recognized the value and really held their ground. And I think that it's important in many ways that our initiative is hopefully sparking this nationwide conversation and recognizing that, what is it, I think, was it 30 million people in the country have used psychedelics in the last decade or so.
Might even be more than that, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so it's something that's you could almost say it's pervasive in our culture. I would imagine that a lot of people don't even want to talk about it, but a lot of individuals have used them before.
Yeah.
And
when people say I'm a child of the 60s
exactly.
code. And what I'm hearing is more young people now are using psychedelics than they were in the Woodstock era, like in the 60s into the 70s.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I guess it's easier to obtain. The markets have it's interesting. I love the study of black markets. I got into it studying Soviet Russia and like how the black markets worked there when I was an undergrad, and I loved that shit. And it was like, oh, okay, so these things are just ever present no matter where you are. You could go to Siberia for the rest of your life. But maybe it took like 30, 50 years of like deep black market channels developing that are just never, ever going to go away. And they're more established than they were then. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like what we're doing here is creating in some ways a safety net, right? So in Denver with our initiative, we're decriminalizing the personal use and personal possession of psilocybin mushrooms, and personal possession includes the propagation or the cultivation at home. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a pretty good step in the right direction, but it allows people to release their burden of that underlying fear, potentially of some kind of, criminal penalty or being, just that penalty. Mm. And that's one part of this process. And I don't know what it's going to look like, like this is an important first step, and then starting the conversation and really opening it up for the opportunity for more research to explore these substances more, specifically mushrooms, and how they can have an impact on our culture. But most of all, with our campaign, we want to keep individuals out of prison, keep our families together, and really help our vets and help individuals who have these traumas that they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's the fact that you get to get near politicians, even if it's only a city or like local politicians, and talk about this stuff, I think is huge. These people probably wouldn't have been exposed to the depth of this information ever if it wasn't for this initiative. I assume you get to sit down with people on a somewhat frequent basis.
Yeah, we've had a warm reception from the city officials. Part of this process of getting on the ballot was sitting down with attorneys from the city and county of Denver. Once we actually had our final language and went through and got it approved, there's a whole process where we sit with city council. They ask very specific questions about what our intentions are, and for clarification, and then that gets shot off to Denver elections, where they look at it for basically legal efficacy to make sure it lines up with, did you write this? Is the legalese appropriate and effective? And there are a lot of interested, political individuals and lobbyists in the city who are looking at this, and who otherwise probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to be educated by it. So it's important to I know that right now in Colorado, the state legislature is actually meeting on changing the laws around drug policy. They're looking at safe injection sites and perhaps different kinds of penalties. Like instead of jail time, you'd have rehabilitation for individuals. So it's in the conversation, and now mushrooms gets to be a part of that conversation.
Colorado's an interesting place in that it historically has been a very Republican state. Now it's like, because of all the people coming into the state for cannabis, recreation, whatever else, just a better lifestyle than San Francisco or whatever, like you're getting this influx of kind of intelligentsia / for whatever, better or worse, liberal elite. And it's an interesting thing because this drug policy discussion, like, do we really want to keep doing harm to people? Like, how bad is it to put folks in jail? How expensive is it to the taxpayer? A supervised injection site costing substantially less than cleaning up dead folks on the street. From a purely economic perspective, it makes a shitload of sense. And it's cool to see that there's some sort of interesting right-left synergy there around that. It's not just like a straight left issue. It's also like, hey, this makes financial sense also. It's interesting that Denver is the place, because it is this weird, interesting nexus. It's kind of like a microcosm of the U.S. in a lot of ways. Like San Francisco is way too far in one direction, and Houston's too far in the other direction. So why not here?
Yeah, there's a lot of intersecting cultures here, and belief systems, worldviews. It's been a very interesting for me to watch Denver transform. I was born and raised in the city. Left for a number of years, and then promptly came back from my time on the East Coast. And watching the city change, of course, the cannabis industry has transformed the city in many ways, but there's also a lot of big business, and there's a lot of, just technology individuals moving to this part of the country. And I think that drug policy is something, people are starting to wake up to the fact that we need to make some changes, whether it makes sense financially, or whether it makes sense ethically to help people, right? Like there needs to be some kind of a cross-pollination there between the two sides. And it's interesting with the campaign, because our campaign in many ways is it's trans-political in that sense, where we get to work with individuals who are on both sides of the aisle. For instance, veterans advocates for veterans, resources for veterans, for treatment options and things like that, and then of course mental health and drug policy advocates, and that intersection of worldview, I think, is what makes this a really strong campaign, where we have the opportunity to reach a lot of very different people with a different mindset, and in many ways start to unify them under a concept that this is important for Denver, it's important for our culture, and it's a huge opportunity here for the city and for the state of Colorado to make a statement nationally that we want to see some changes in policy direction here, and we want to have better access for individuals to have those alternative options, because at the end of the day, just from my own personal experience and from the stories I've heard from a lot of different people, like mushrooms help in a very profound way. And opening that door is a very necessary first step to start to, as Michael Pollan said in his book, start to change people's minds, theoretically and literally. And, we get to move in the right direction here. Yeah.
Just the medical applications alone are huge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of like running through it. Stamets talks about stuttering, which I think is ripe for research, and like the degree to which stutters are crippling folks.
Yeah.
Like it's it makes you almost not functional in society to have a stutter. And autoimmune diseases with potential origins in anxiety and depression, like That's a huge area of research I think we need to dig into. Depression, for a number of reasons, I think is an easy first thing to study, but there's so much room left, and there's so much room left for patents and whatever else, and improved grow techniques, because we don't all need pharmaceutical grade psilocybin powdered.
We sure don't.
You sure don't. I do not really plan to pay that price for GMP psilocybin. Which I think it's like
it's like $6,000 per
a
dose. I think so.
At 5 grams probably. I think that I did the math when they put out some numbers, and it was about that. I'm like, you can get serious analogs for not that much money, or get your own mushrooms for what is an eighth, like $15 to $30 maximum. You go to Jamaica, it's way more, even to buy it on the street, but it's legal there. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like, what is some of the positive feedback you're hearing from city politicians?
We haven't heard a lot of, they're all pretty neutral right now. They're waiting to see what happens.
They are politicians.
There are politicians. I had one guy say, I think you might be ahead of your time, which I laughed, because I'm like, well, I'm not quite sure. You may not know exactly what you're talking about there, sir, because
they don't understand the full global situation.
Yeah, they don't, and they don't understand the just the sheer number of people who support this in Denver, and I would say nationally as well. Like, this is something that having eyeballs on this movement is a pretty big deal in spreading awareness. And but for the most part, they've been neutral. We're still waiting. We're waiting for whatever our opposition looks like. Now that the midterm elections are over, I would expect that we'll start hearing some, hearing from those guys.
I can't wait.
I'm excited about it. Yeah, we can't have a conversation without two opposing sides, right? So like bring it on. And this is something where, as opposed to all the cannabis legislation, back in the mid 90s and the early 2000s, when cannabis started to become medical and then decriminalized and then recreational, there wasn't this amount of clinical research that's been done, clinical research and population studies. And so I think we're very well prepared for any kind of opposition that comes on board. And we're looking forward to it, because it just gives people an opportunity to have a better understanding of what exactly psilocybin does and how it can have a great impact in people's lives. And so we need that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see who comes out of the woodwork here. Yeah.
I can't imagine very productive counter arguments. Like, I'm trying to think it up in my head, and all it is just like hateful shit. I'm just like, there's nothing. I can't think of it. It's like the safest of all recreational drugs.
Exactly.
Like, pretty well established, substantially safer than alcohol and cannabis, which is incredible that it's safer than cannabis. And it's just this. It's just gonna happen. I also can't wait to have conversations with these people. Maybe they'll be willing to record with me and have a debate.
That'd be great. Yeah. What was it? Johns Hopkins that just came out and said that psilocybin should at a minimum be a Schedule 4, which is...
I didn't even know existed.
Right? Exactly. What is a Schedule 4? It puts it on the same level as like prescription sleep aids, basically. And so that just goes to show like there is no scientific basis for psilocybin to be a Schedule 1 substance. I mean, Schedule 1 is defined as no medical value and high risk of abuse, right? And we already know that that's, from the clinical research and the population studies alone, that's false. And so this opposition, I mean, whenever we get a no from somebody, I mean, right now we get some no's, of course, and it's in terms of collecting signatures, it's like, okay, have a great day, and you move on. We're not debating anybody right now. But it feels like it's based just from a misunderstanding and lack of education. And so like with our campaign, that's the big opportunity we have, is to, in many ways, just rebrand the image of psychedelics away from the stigma of the 60s and 70s, and really start to look at, science-based, factual research and information around it, and also having a very professional presence. And speaking about it from that context I think it surprises a lot of people, because some individuals get the sense that, we're just a bunch of like for lack of a better term, hippie stoners, who want to party and get high all the time. And no, this is something that we really believe in the benefit and the value here. And why not Denver? I mean, Denver's a great spot for it. Strong history of drug policy reform, obviously. And, it's this nexus of a lot of different things going on.
I had a good friend. I think it was springtime. I talked to her about your initiative and just decriminalization to legalization in general. And the first thing she jumps to is, but people are going to drive their cars while high on mushrooms. I was like, well, they're doing that already. It's a very small amount of people. People know not to do that. And, people are driving drunk all the time and driving stoned all the time. It is alarming, though, that I have heard people tell me about driving on acid recently as if it's no big deal. I'm just like, dude, you're putting a lot of people's lives at risk. So while it is a thing, I think we just have to realize that there's so many people driving very drunk that like the number that you would be adding is so minuscule as to like barely move the numbers. And there needs to be an education campaign, which we're doing.
Right.
And
yeah, responsible use is very important.
Right.
Looking at set and setting and just having the right intention around the substances. People get confused about, when they say recreational versus medical. And in that sense, like, what might look like a recreational trip on the outside to that individual might be a very highly medicinal therapeutic experience, right? And so we do have our work ahead of us in that sense in terms of providing all the information and the data, but also really emphasizing that it's very important that, these are very powerful substances, and they're powerful whether or not they're used in the right context, and so being responsible, being smart, don't go drive when you're tripping. That's a really bad idea. Mm-hmm. And it is few and far between, and there might be a risk. A very small percentage of individuals who do that. However, it's like you said, it's minuscule. And we have to consider just all of the other different factors here when it comes to the overwhelming positive benefits of these substances and for how they can just really transform our communities, individuals all the way up to our communities. And people are driving drunk all the time. People are driving stoned all the time. And I would not advocate for anyone to drive while they're tripping. However, if that's your choice, that's your choice. Just we would say be very smart about it.
And be ready for the legal consequences that are going to be extreme. My line back to this friend was like, well, is it really ethical to put people in jail because a couple people might drive high? It's like, no, for many reasons. And then you talk about like the downstream implications for tearing families apart, all these other crazy things. It's it's a big deal. And you were talking about therapeutic versus recreational. It's definitely more of either a spectrum or like a Cartesian plane or something, XY.
Sure.
Like there's a lot of different use cases and a lot of different scenarios, and not all dance parties where you're tripping are not therapeutic. Some might be not therapeutic, but some very well might be. Like there's a whole tradition in India. This is not an Indian tradition. This is kind of a neologism of a tradition. Psychedelic trance, like in Goa, India, is a big thing, and it happened like I think on mid-disco era, late hippie era, and people were just like dancing for 18 hours straight and having extraordinarily transcendent experiences. I'm sure plenty of it was not healthy, but I'm sure a lot of it was really interesting, spiritual, and therapeutic.
And that was just dancing with no substances.
No.
Oh, they were definitely
acid and mushrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a very literal psychedelic movement. Psychedelic trance, Goa trance. It just moved right from like the hippie era into disco and electronic right away. As soon as they could do it, they did it. It's fascinating. It's not the same place it was back then, but it's still an interesting nexus. Yeah. So what are your project plans over the next, like maybe let's call it 2 months?
Yeah. Highly focused on signatures right now. We need approximately 5,000 to make the ballot. Have about 2,000 right now. So that's that's the main focus here. We're also coalition building. We're starting to have conversations with individuals and groups doing some fundraising. Definitely going to have some fundraisers coming up here probably in December and January. But mostly it's really just getting our volunteers activated, getting out on the streets, really making ourselves known to the residents of Denver that we're here. This is a real thing. We're collecting signatures, and like that's the main focus right now. Because we're still, we are collecting signatures, but we're semi-official at this point. We have until January 7th to collect them and, to make a real statement that, yes, we're going to be on the ballot. And then once we're on the ballot, then our campaign work starts. Then our outreach starts in a much larger way. So, yeah, the next 2 months is just hitting the streets, getting out there and just sharing as much about our work and as much about psilocybin as we can, and starting to make those kind of big connections with potential donors or individuals who want to be involved in any sort of way. And it's exciting because this is it's a pretty new thing, and people are very excited about it. And so they want to get involved, and they want to. I've had just so many requests for tabling at events in Denver and just showing up at certain functions throughout the city. And now that the election is over, I think we'll have an even bigger chance now to start making a lot of those connections to some of these nonprofit organizations. Speaking with Normal, speaking with some other drug policy groups, and just getting the word out. It's really all that matters right now, because if we need to make the ballot. Once we make the ballot, then it's really game on, and get a chance here to just make a huge impact in Denver. Yeah.
For some reason, I was just reminded of a story my breathwork teacher told me, Lenny Gibson. He had, I think, multiple bouts of cancer, and real psychedelic scholar. Incredibly mad at Tim Leary because he was in these cancer support groups and saw these people that could have got help and had their suffering relieved tremendously if that didn't happen. I personally don't want to blame Tim on that. I blame Nixon. But just like looking at the purely at decreasing suffering, like it's a tremendously important thing that you're working on. If all the residents of Denver could then somewhat legally access mushrooms, and if they're going through life-threatening cancer or whatever else, they have a life-threatening surgery coming up, it's freaking them out. They could do a couple mushroom sessions and, tremendously decrease their anxiety around everything, at a pretty substantial rate. Like, this isn't 100%, right? We got to be kind of honest about that.
Absolutely.
But it is very high. It's way higher than placebo, especially if you could find a sitter or guide, which is an interesting concept. Now that we have the Federal Right to Try Act, it seems like there is an opening for skilled facilitators to jump in there. But it seems like it's really lowly, like not utilized very heavily. I'm sure the psychiatrist that prescribed your bud the psilocybin went out on a limb to do this.
He did. Absolutely.
Put your licensure at risk and all this other shit. And it's scary. Like, I talk to a lot of clinicians, and it's no joke.
And those are the questions that we need to explore as well. Like, if this eventually turns into a regulatory medical paradigm, like, licensure is important, because I think that with all the research, right, like, psychiatrists and clinicians are going to want to start exploring this more. And, both insurance and licensure, those are definitely big steps in the conversation. And how do we essentially create a new paradigm to open up that work in a professional therapeutic manner? These are the things that are very important, and they're important for my friend who's going through this, because in many ways he's still at risk, statewide and federally, because he has to source it himself. And even though he has a doctor's permission slip, there's still a risk there. And he, for good reason, he's very hesitant about speaking publicly about it, just because of that, basically, both insurance reasons and also the legality, and also, his psychiatrist licensure. But I think that because they're so, when he told me that they're really so just blown away by this. It bodes really well. They're documenting now and really wanting to explore this. And so if we can decriminalize it first and then start to create a framework and start to understand this a little bit more, then I think it's going to open up the doorway, at least for Denver, potentially Colorado, and we'll see which other parts of the country follow suit.
This concept of grand rounds?
No, tell me about it.
Doctors do? Okay, so doctors will, on occasion, get together. I don't know with what regularity, but hospitals typically do it, and sometimes they'll have guest speakers show up, or once in a while, head of a department will present some data. I think particularly around a couple case studies. So if this case study was documented, which it is, and maybe two more, and then they start getting traveled around at hospitals inside grand rounds to say, hey, look at this. This is a big deal. And then, it grows inside the medical community kind of organically that way. And the good news is we have all these now MDMA therapists that are going around sharing their, miracle stories with their patients. We just released an episode with a patient and a therapist, I think from the New Orleans site, which is really incredible. Once we start doing this with psilocybin and, we're doing it at Psychedelics Today and the doctors are doing it at Grand Rounds, I think there's going to be some tremendous movement. And this is, where that politician is wrong. The politicians don't necessarily understand science or medicine. That was Elon Musk's number one criticism of the Trump administration. Is like, they should probably know a little bit more about science than they do. And I was like, well, I don't doubt it. But, that's a big deal. And it's coming and it's unstoppable at this point. Like back before the internet, Nixon could say, science, whatever. I'm going to throw, the fear of communist Russia at you instead. And what happens if we lose Vietnam? Blah, blah, blah. And, science goes, missing. And now you just can't hide stuff anymore. Anonymity is gone for the most part. And secrets don't last. So this is, a new era, and I don't think you can sweep it up. So you're kind of at the vanguard of this.
Feels like it. Feels like it for sure. Yeah. And that's the thing with social media alone, I like to make the comparison to the cannabis movement and legislation. We didn't really have the Facebook wasn't as prolific back then. Social media wasn't as prolific, even in the early 2000s. Now, we can reach 30,000 people in a month. A significant
it's an accelerant.
It absolutely. And this is, I think it's going to work in many of the same ways that mycelium spreads. This is something that could go exponential pretty quickly. And it's important to have that solid framework, though, to begin with. And just getting the word out is such a big deal to us. The fact that we even have the ability to do this right now and have as much support as we have it feels like a huge gift. Feels like the right timing. But you're right, man. The research is out there. All it takes is a Google search. All it takes is typing in benefits of mushrooms, and then there you go. It's all laid out there for you. And when we talk about on the streets, when we're talking to some people about this, and we start mentioning Johns Hopkins, NYU, Harbor UCLA Medical Center, some of these big medical universities that have been doing the research, it's like, oh, wait, that's a real thing? Oh, I might have been on the fence, and now I'm actually very interested. Tell me more about this.
Same situation with my parents.
Right.
I assumed they knew because I was talking about it so much.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, all these hospitals and research institutions. And they're like, oh, you're not an idiot. Cool. That's good to know.
Yeah. It's like, thanks for sharing. And now that we have this whole medical paradigm that can't be ignored, we have this opportunity. Like with the campaign, the clinical research is extremely relevant, very necessary. It's a little bit secondary because we're focusing more on the public health and safety aspects of it, right? So the clinical research is extremely supportive of our work, and we do reference it and cite it when we're talking to individuals. But for us, it goes back to more of these population studies Specifically, there's a study that came out, I think it was a couple of years ago, that looked at lifetime psilocybin use and reduced risk of using opioids. There's another population study that came out that talked about reduced criminal behavior, tendencies toward criminal behavior. Of course, the Global Drug Survey is the safest recreational drug. These are in our language. These are the studies that we're citing that are more relevant to the work of decriminalization. And I mean, people are very surprised and they're very interested.
Do you cite anything about prison and prison harm?
We don't. Not in our language. Yeah. Are you familiar with any studies like that?
Not offhand. Jag Davies at Drug Policy Alliance, Dr. Carl Hart. Those are the people I would look to. If you haven't read Dr. Carl Hart's High Price, it's incredible. He's he's kind of my drug policy hero. Him and Jag Davies, more Carl Hart, but you're familiar with Jag?
I like Jag. We've had a couple conversations in the past couple months. I like him.
His points about medicalization doesn't equal rescheduling. So if it's prescribable, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to remove it from Schedule 3 or outside of scheduling altogether. We would all like to see these things in what we're now calling Schedule 4. Which I'm glad to know about that term. But Carl Hart, he's interesting because he grew up, I think, it was either like the ghettos of Miami or Atlanta, one of the two. And he had extremely detailed stories to share about like the familial harm. And then he would go on to, cite stats about I think the term I like to throw out, I don't know where it's from, is like it takes the family after like a drug offense like this, and the family gets broken up, 5 to 7 generations to recover fully.
I have heard of that before. I have heard that
before,
that phrase. And we want to stop doing that. I mean, obviously, it's something that...
How bad is that for the kids?
It's awful. Yeah, I mean, I have a 4-year-old.
Imagine if you just go to jail for 10 years.
Terrible.
That's
be
the worst. Not necessarily the worst case scenario for the child, but really bad.
And there's approximately 70 arrests a year in the Denver metro area for psilocybin and psilocin. And that's already a pretty low number. People think that's already kind of really a low law enforcement priority. But looking at it another way, that's 70 individuals who now have a felony on their record and potentially, go to prison and have their families separated.
Branches out. It's not just 70. It's
it impacts
hundreds,
thousands of people.
Thousands,
maybe. I mean, it's about time these things change. We need to have a new conversation around drug policy in general, not just psilocybin. And I think that in many ways, decriminalizing psilocybin can open the door for more of like a Portugal model down the road, potentially for decriminalizing all drugs. This is something that's very important. And then said another way, like in terms of public health and safety, there's only 70 arrests every year as well. So it's a very, if it was dangerous, we'd be hearing about it in the news. We'd be hearing about it in our local papers, and there'd be much more stigma around use than there is if it was actually a problem, right? And so it's a matter of keeping people out of prison, keeping families together. That's priority one for us.
Got an interesting story. Somebody I know somewhat locally here got caught with a fair amount of mushrooms and had to do some jail time, but it was roped into this huge bust. It was like these people who were doing all sorts of bad shit, selling roofies, cocaine, all behind a bar. And I'm like, what is going on? And this guy who's not even associated with it got roped in, like mushroom dealer. I'm like, what the fuck? So, they're throwing the book at all these people. They went away for a long time. And it was possible that he was also going to go away for a long time. But when they went to sentence, they actually went back and go, we don't really know anything about mushrooms, so let's Google this and dig in. And they're like 0 addiction potential, really minimal harm. It's actually medical for a lot of folks. And they ended up only giving him 2 weeks when he could have got years, years and years. And
wow.
Years. Yeah.
That's huge.
Right. Wow. Consider that happened somewhat recently in the judicial system in Colorado.
Yeah. Sounds like a shifting in the shifting of the guard in some ways.
Right. Like what is good sentencing policy? Which I think no sentencing is good sentencing, but it's trending in the right direction. That's orders of magnitude less severe and didn't even get a felony. Right.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to I mean, if there's a docket case or documentation on that,
see what I can dig up.
Yeah, let's do that because we'll use that for sure.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, that's actually a strong point. And it would be interesting to look at all the other psilocybin cases in the state, and like what happened.
Because that's precedent and that's recent, and that's something that can be used just in our messaging down the road. You know, once we're on the ballot, like it's because I think it's important for the public to also have these court cases. You know, there's a little bit of precedent right now with cultivation because in New Mexico, you're allowed to cultivate.
Not many people know that.
Not many know that. Yep.
As soon as you dry it, though.
Yeah. As soon as you dry it, it becomes it's illegal. But it was New Mexico versus Pratt, I think 2005, and the New Mexico Court of Appeals basically said cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms does not qualify as manufacture of a controlled substance. So you can cultivate at home, you can eat the wet fruiting bodies, but you just can't dry it. So yeah, there's a little bit of precedent there. So sounds like there's some precedent here in Colorado too already, where you know, if was it a judge or a jury that had the outcome in that case?
It's a great question. I don't know.
Very interesting.
I imagine it was a representative of the district attorney in conjunction with the judge, but I'm not 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Right?
Yeah.
The district attorney here is a jerk. I don't know if he's still in power, but he was like putting people up on murder charges for like a text about like, this is going to kill you, but here's how you smoke a fentanyl patch. Like, don't do it because you'll die, but here's how you do it.
Wow.
Right. And he got brought, the DA, it got dismissed. He didn't get convicted, but like the DA still went for it. And I think that's just so unethical. And it seems like that is what the current administration is pushing, though. More murder charges. Like, how do we increase sentencing for these opioid deaths? Because that's what's going to fix it.
It's very interesting to me that, you know, this administration is going in that direction, and at the same time has the Federal Right to Try Act as well. It's kind of like almost seems like a conflict of interest there in some ways. You know, I don't understand the whole politics game. I'm learning very, very quickly.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think there's this, like, they're seeing pressure on the for-profit prison industry. So they're like, shit, like, this is really going to cut into our profits. I think a lot of people have those as part of their hedge funds and portfolios. I started realizing recently that I might own some stock in those as a result of some mutual funds. And I was like, fuck, I need to get rid of that. Like, I don't even know how to find out if that's in my portfolio. But like, I guess who are the top 10 for-profit companies for prisons? And then are they in your portfolio? That's pretty easy if you just take it at that. As long as they're not in the top 10, maybe it's not so bad. If you want to be, I don't know. I don't know what the right move is here, man. But I have a feeling that a lot of rich folks have it as part of their money. So like they want to protect it, and like harsher drug policy is twofold. It like scared parents go, okay, that's great. And rich people are like, oh, okay, that's great. And you know, I don't know who else you're hitting other than scared parents. But maybe people who have lost a friend, you know, like, okay, he did cocaine and he died from fentanyl OD, but who knows? We're getting a little off track from mushrooms here. Mushrooms don't usually have any of these problems.
Not quite my expertise, but like, you know, it's well, I mean, it's important things to talk about because it's people. I think people just, you know, personally, I mean, I don't understand this stuff very much, you know, and creating an opportunity here to start talking about it in a real way and not be scared to talk about it. Yes, there's a prison industrial complex. Yes, there's a pharmaceutical industrial complex, you know, and these are huge things in our country that are contributing to massive suffering for members of our society. And in a lot of ways, it's completely unacceptable and unethical in the treatment of these individuals to have to get put through a system, and especially if it's a matter of filling some rich individual's coffers. Like, that's wrong, which is why, I mean, I'm excited that in Colorado, we are talking about drug policy reform. Of course, we have the campaign with psilocybin, but also the legislature again looking at just different ways to approach the subject and not destroy people's lives. Right? Let's heal people. Let's create an opportunity where they can get the help they need if they want it. And not throw them away, lock and key, and put them into a system that's just going to, in many ways, destroy their lives, destroy their families' lives. What's the point of that?
Yeah, there's no point.
There's no point.
Especially with mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Especially.
Exactly.
It's an interesting linchpin issue. It's like we're, looking for like what's the, like, you don't feel it right now, but what's the lowest effort to get the biggest return? And I think this is it in a lot of ways. Like, how do we lead the charge on ruining less lives and showing, hey, like, here's the argument. This is replicable in other cities. This is replicable with other drugs or all drugs. If you keep using Switzerland, Portugal as like leaders, how little HIV is there now in those countries? It's incredibly low.
Crime rates are down.
Way down.
Addiction rates are down. Like it's something that works. There's a working model for this. And it's about time the U.S. kind of caught up with that. We're supposed to be the quote unquote greatest country in the world and start acting like it, I think is a good idea.
As soon as you start digging into this subject, it just like unravels a whole lot of shit. And you're just like, oh no. Have I been wrong for the last 10 years? Shit. And I think a lot of people have a reaction where they kind of like about face and they're like, nope, this is not at all what I want to support or be about. I'm going to ignore that shit. But hopefully, as we continue to talk about it, they're forced to re-engage in that conversation and realize that, perhaps you do need to realize that there are some serious limitations about the story you've been living or been told. And
that's the fun thing about mushrooms is it gives you a chance to get some perspective, right? And to, I think, reconnect with, in many ways, your humanity and start to kind of understand that we're in this together, and I think we need something in many ways to remind people that we're humans. We might have different worldviews, different belief systems, different ways of being in the world. Mushrooms are a real thing that can actually put you very much in touch with the fact that we're a bunch of humans here, and we have a lot more similarities than differences. And it's something that, at the very least, I think it'll bring a lot of people to the table to have a conversation about these wider issues and wider topics that are impacting our culture. And don't want to get too far off track from the campaign in that sense, but like, in many ways, it feels like this is important work for that reason. Is to start, I keep coming back to this, having the conversation around psychedelics, having the conversation around drug policy. And then really starting to examine the different kind of doors that are open from talking about it, because people want to live their lives and not focus too much on these things, I think, and it can be a scary topic for people. And when we're talking about the prison system, when we're talking about pharmaceuticals and things like that, like it's what's known, and we're introducing something that feels a little bit unknown here. And with all of the evidence and the research and like that clinical backing and the population studies backing, like it's bringing a lot of people to the table to have a conversation, and invoking their curiosity. Like, okay, what is this all about? How do we start moving forward with this? Is it the right step?
What has there been like a particularly common feedback from people who are in support of this, like about time, or like, thank God somebody's doing this, or what? Are you hearing anything positive like that from folks?
We get a lot of hell yes.
Hell yeah.
Well, I'm going to sign this. Hell yes. About time. Let's make this happen. I also hear a lot of stories about how, people say this saved my life. Like, you're like, this mushroom saved my life. And the work you're doing is so important. and we need this. And that's kind of the word on the street right now from just engaging with individuals in Denver. Like, people are excited and they want to see this happen. And again, it just comes down to educating people for those no's. In our polling, we had 45% support and then 20% maybe. And that's a big margin right there. It's a lot of people that we can talk to and impact.
Swam with data.
Exactly. As soon as we drop the data, it's fence sitters tend to, at the very least, sign the petition to get on the ballot. And then really at that point, when we get on the ballot, because we will, it's on us to have that really impactful, interesting, inspiring data that's like, okay, this is something we need. This is something that's important for us as, in Denver. This is something that's important for our culture. We have an opioid issue in Denver, just like every other major city across the country. And, there's again, that undercurrent of use, individuals going to prison for this or facing pretty severe criminal penalties. It's time to change the paradigm and, just move forward one small step at a time. We'll decriminalize first.
It's so easy to want to rush. I think a lot of us do it, and we just need to remember to take a breath, play the long game. Like, we have years left to sort all this shit out before it's, doomsday. We have time. We just got to play that time and not feel panicked. And play intelligently, because when you start playing fearfully, you're theirs. and it sounds like you're doing it really skillfully, really intentionally. You've got the support you need to put this thing together in a smart way.
And we want to work with the city on this. Part of our language includes the formation of a psilocybin mushroom policy review panel, which will be a city level committee. Made up of members of Denver City Council, Denver Sheriff's Office, Denver Police Department, health professionals, city attorneys, and then also individuals appointed by the mayor who are involved with our group as well. So that's a real opportunity for, to get law enforcement and criminal justice and city officials on board in the conversation, working alongside health professionals who have experience here and can talk from a scientific, clinical understanding, and really start to just to have these, have everybody get on the same page here and see what the impact is of decriminalization in Denver. Is a good step, because it's important to work. It's very important to work, with the city officials on this, and which is why it feels really good to at least have, if not outright support, a lot of neutrality here. The city's been very professional working with us.
Great.
Yeah.
Do they like the idea of having that panel or commission or
I don't know.
review group? No,
I don't know.
Okay.
There's there are panels for cannabis, and I think including that in the language really makes a statement that we don't want to just have this go wild on them. It's something that at least indicating that we really want to examine the impacts of this down the road is important, because then it's going to give us an opportunity to start talking about what that regulatory framework looks like potentially down the road.
Be interesting to get some data from Portugal on their psychedelic mushroom use or cultivation or busts or whatever, just general health data. I'm sure they have something.
Probably published.
Probably in Portuguese,
somewhere,
unfortunately, but I'm sure somebody can help you figure that out. I just recorded with the folks from Cosmic Hair. They're kind of the European Zendo project. So they go around to different festivals doing harm reduction. And it was 2 PhDs who I got to chat with, and they talked a lot about the harm reduction data, and that was really cool. Could probably link you up with those too.
That's great.
Yeah.
Data.
Data
is important.
We're at about an hour.
Cool.
We got some time to close up shop, so let's maybe kind of wrap in a few. But what have we maybe missed?
Well, I'll say this: the more people who want to volunteer with our campaign, let's get you on board. If you're in the Denver area, we could use all the help we can get in that sense. We have a great team right now. This is something that's so important to a lot of people. We've had a lot of overwhelming support in that sense, and now's the groundwork. Now it's boots on the ground, engaging with the public. We have a very strong handful of volunteers right now who've been able to gather already 2,000 signatures. So if we can, kind of 5x or 10x those volunteers, and start to reach more people in Denver, and basically have the resources to reach more people in Denver. If we can drop 15, 20,000 signatures on Denver elections come January, that would be a huge statement. And then, you asked earlier kind of what our game plan is for the next couple of months. And I did forget to mention that another thing we're doing is we're going to be having open to the public Q&As starting up here pretty soon, probably bi-monthly, or is that bi-monthly? Bi-weekly, excuse me, 2 times a month.
The good news is that bi-weekly means 2 different things. So I say twice monthly.
Twice monthly. But this will be, we'll have health professionals and also individuals from our campaign there just to answer questions for people who want to have a better understanding of how this stuff works, what we're doing with the campaign, and just be there to really open it up to the public so that more people can talk about it and get their questions answered.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be able to stream those at all?
I would love to. Yeah, we'll be live streaming those.
Great.
We try to live stream all of our training and public events on our Facebook page.
That's excellent. Live streaming is complicated but worthwhile.
Even if it turns out choppy, it's still it's great. This technology is amazing. And to be able to do that, to spread the message like that is, it's a huge gift, and it's a lot of fun too. I mean, we can do this and kind of bootstrap our technology together and make it really accessible to people. So, that and decriminalizedenver.org is our website. Our socials are Decriminalize Denver, Facebook and Instagram right now. And really just, if you're not in Denver, share our socials, spread the word, follow our page. We do have our donation link set up on the website. We are definitely looking for some funding right now to help really.
Do you accept crypto?
We can't accept crypto.
Whoa.
Yeah, we can't have any anonymous donations over $100. And that's just for campaign finance purposes. So I think if we may be able to do crypto for amounts under $100. But it's campaign finance. All that stuff is tracked. We report to the city every single month with that stuff. So, but our website is live, and we are looking into actually doing crypto.
Cool.
One of my advisors just asked yesterday, like, are we able to take anonymous donations here? Could we do cryptocurrency? Is that something that's possible? And just have to get clarification on that one. So.
Yeah. I can see how the bad guys would do it, but let's stay good. You don't want to get in trouble for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's bringing psychedelics, in a new way into the mainstream, and so everything is, we're very authentic and very transparent, and that's, both with the city and with our campaign. And we want to be, we want to be as open as possible because it's something that's such a sensitive topic in many ways that the more transparent we are, I think the greater chance we're going to have here to make a real impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin Matthews, thank you very much for joining us on Psychedelics today.
Thank you, Joe.
Can't wait to get you back on.
It's been a pleasure.
Maybe we can do some cool Instagram live stuff at some point, or some webinars.
Let's collaborate. Sounds great.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Kevin Matthews, Denver Psilocybin Initiative, or Decriminalize Denver. Please do check him out. If you live in Denver or have friends there, please ask them to volunteer or get involved if you have some time. I'm sure it would make a difference. And imagine what a global difference that would make once we have an American city leading the charge that way. I think it would be a really important and big deal. So please do support it. And if you want to support us, like I said before, Facebook and iTunes reviews really help us out, helps us pull bigger guests, and makes it easier for us to recruit guests as well. And, you know, we like to pull in a lot of smaller people who aren't big yet, like young grad students and stuff like that. So even having a lot of reviews there helps us out on that level as well. So please do leave us a review. If you want to support us financially, we do take monthly donations on Patreon. Anything from $1 a month and up would be beautiful. We also have some beautiful mugs and sweatshirts for sale at psychedelicstodayshop.com. And we have a whole bunch of courses, paid and free, at our website. You can check that stuff out at psychedelicstoday.com. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you really, really liked it, send it to your friends in Denver. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And this is Joe Moore signing off from Breckenridge, Colorado. Bye-bye.